everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. Um, I think let's kick off the event and start with it. I'm Sachi Jain, and I'm pursuing Master of Integrated Product Design here at University of Pennsylvania. The Water Innovation and Design Club is excited to host two incredible visionaries in design and innovation, whose groundbreaking work has revolutionized the way we perceive and approach design. Allow me to introduce our esteemed moderator, Professor Karl Ulrich. He holds the prestigious position of CIBC Professor of Entrepreneurship and E-commerce at Wharton School. His research is focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and product development. At Penn, he co-founded the Integrated Product Design Program, an institution fostering innovation. Additionally, Professor Ulrich has led dozens of innovation himself, holds more than 20 patents. He is a co-founder of TerraPass Inc. and is a designer of Zoota Scooter. He holds the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. He is also the author of Product Design and Development and recently published Innovation Tournaments. And now, our very own special guest for today, Professor Don Norman. I speak for everyone when I say that you have shaped the way we look at design to be intuitive and accessible. He was the founding director of Design Lab and founding chair of Cognitive Science Department at UC San Diego. He co-founded the Nielsen Norman Group and is former vice president of advanced technology at Apple, where he originally coined the term user experience. He received a bachelor's from MIT and pursued a master's in electrical engineering and a doctorate in psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He has published 21 books, including The Design of Everyday Things, and is considered as Bible by designers and engineers. His publication is Designed for a Better World on creating a meaningful, sustainable, and humanity-centered design is what brought us us here. Let's dive in and learn from them. I'd like to hand it over to Professor Karl Ulrich to kick off the event.
All right. Thanks so much, Sanchi. And Don, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
And I'm glad I knew what you'd be wearing. So I took a guess on harmonizing our wardrobe, given this is a designerly gathering. So here's what I thought we would do. Don, you have pretty nicely articulated and strongly held views about the best way for these events to go. So I'm going to try to follow them as closely as possible. And I thought I would guide you with some questions about the book primarily for maybe about 30 minutes. And then we would open it up to our audience. And I thought in a fit of lunacy, we might see if we can get people to turn on their cameras and ask questions. If not, I have a backlog of questions that have been pre-submitted, and we also have the chat. So that's our backup plan if everyone's too timid to turn on their video and ask. How's that sound?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let me start actually with just a little bit of my own introduction to how I know Don. I was a graduate student in 1988. I used to think that was a long time ago, but Don, I think, was on his third career by then already. So, and I read this beautiful book, which the title when I read it was The Psychology of Everyday Things, and that's how I know when I read it, because I think soon after the first printing, someone in marketing suggested that it be renamed The Design of Everyday Things. I read it when it was The Psychology of Everyday Things, and the book had a huge influence on me. I was already committed to working in the area of design, but I really hadn't done anything related to product design, hadn't thought much about the user experience. I was more a technical, mechanical engineering design guy. So it really, in many ways, nudged me into my current career. And so I owe a huge debt to that book and to Don. And I've had the great fortune of interacting with Don over the years and following his work with great interest.
Let me comment that I too had that same career path. That is, I started off at MIT with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and I was a complete nerd. And then I went to Penn, to the Moore School of Electrical Engineering, because I wanted to study computers and work on computers and build intelligent machines. But I got a master's degree there, but they didn't have computers. Nobody was doing computers. Computers were developed at Penn. That's one reason I was there. but everybody had left and started a company. To be exact, Remington ran Univac, the giant brain that had 1,000 words of memory. Can you imagine? And I programmed it. You had to program in machine language. And I don't mean today's assembly code, I mean numbers. And you had to walk inside the computer because it was run by vacuum tubes. You may not know what those are, except audio fans. And a vacuum tube had a mean life of about 1,000 hours. And so they were always burning out. So you had to walk inside and keep changing the tubes to run a program. But it was only when I accidentally got into psychology. I got there because I wanted to study computers, and nobody was doing it at Penn. And then suddenly the psychology department started a new program. The new chair was a physicist, and they hired a mathematician. And it sounded interesting to me. And I talked to them, and they said, "You don't know anything about psychology? Wonderful, come in the department." And so that's where I started to learn a little bit about people. And I changed. I'm no longer a nerd. In fact, I tell engineers, the problem with what you're thinking is it's too logical. People aren't logical. Logic is not how people think. Logic was invented by mathematicians and philosophers. So come on, you got to understand people.
Yeah, in fact, let me just underscore a heuristic we both have followed in our careers, which is always choose the opportunity for which you're least qualified and just barge into some new field. I'm totally serious. I think it's a great recipe for excitement, for learning a lot, and for having the potential to actually make a difference because you bring fresh eyes to topic.
Yes, but there's a caveat that is, yes, choose new fields that you know nothing about, but that sound exciting and interesting. Because if you're not excited by it, you won't do well.
All right. Well, I had the pleasure of reading your book today because I knew I was doing this thing, and so I got the book. We're going to talk about the Don's new book, which is Design for a Better World, MIT Press 2023. Now, there it is, beautiful. Everyone go out and buy it, and you can one click, you can be reading it with the magic of the Kindle web browser. So Don, honestly, I got to tell you, the first part of the book's a bit of a downer. And so let's get the downer part out of the way real quick. So in just 2 or 3 minutes, what are the biggest crises we face in the 21st century? Let's just get it out on the table and know the problem we're dealing with.
Well, the downer, of course, is my starting by saying the world is a mess. But the point of the book is to be optimistic, to say, but we can do something about it. Because what I said was, so this is a long answer to your question, but I'm sitting here in my study in San Diego, and if I turn to the left and look out that window, I can see palm trees and animals. We have hummingbirds, and we have hawks, and we have flycatchers, and we have squirrels and coyotes and rabbits. And I see in the distance other houses, and then I see the city of San Diego and Mission Bay, which is a wonderful recreational area. And in the distance, I see the mountains of Mexico. Okay, well, almost everything is artificial. Mission Bay used to be a swamp. It was made into a recreational area. I'm on a steep hill. And the fact that they had to flatten it to be able to put this house here. And all the palm trees have been planted by people. And everything that we see was done by people. And the animals are real, but they are living in this artificial environment. And the mountains of Mexico, well, they're real, but the notion of Mexico, the notion of countries is artificial. And so almost everything that we do today is artificial. Our laws are all artificial. The notion of countries are artificial. That means they were designed. I don't mean by professional designers, but they were designed by people over thousands of years. And that's the way we live. And different cultures live in different ways because the way that we live is not the only way it's possible. So that means we could change. And so the reason that I said, the reason I'm optimistic is we can change things. It's hard and it's slow, but we have changed many, many things already. Although, look, giving women the right to vote, that took, 50, 70 years to happen. but it happened. And it would have been unthinkable to the people 200 years ago. Now, when I wrote the book, I said, my previous books made things more easy to use and easier to understand, and that's good and important, but it doesn't change the world. But when I thought about how can I say something that might change the world, I said, but the problems are all well known. I don't have to tell you about the problems. So there's nothing new I can add. But you know what? The solutions are well known. I don't have to add new solutions. They're also known. And many good people have proposed them and have tried to use them, but they haven't been adopted. And so I said, what is it that I can do? Well, I'm an engineer. I understand technology. I was an executive at a technology company, so I understand how business works. I understand politics because when I worked at Apple, I went and spent a lot of time with Congress. I'm partially responsible for getting the Wi-Fi band, the very first Wi-Fi band, accepted. And I also was involved in setting up the high definition television standards. And for all of these, I had to walk the halls of Congress and meet with Congress people, senators, representatives, and more importantly than them, their staffs. Because it's the staffs who really understand what's going on and it can tell them what they should do because they are too busy going to meetings and doing 1,000 different things to be able to read any of the documents. So maybe that's what I can do. And that's what my book is about. So rather than name the 4 or 5 issues, I named the ones where I thought that I could say something different. What I have presented is a new perspective, not new ideas. I deliberately did not do new ideas because I didn't want you to say, oh, it's that crazy Don Norman and his crazy ideas, but a new perspective on how to view this and how we might solve them. And so the 4 major ideas are that everything is official and therefore is artificial. Most things are artificial and therefore we can change them. Second, that we have lots of things that just don't make sense. They're not meaningful. Third, we have to do sustainability. And nowadays we have to do a robustness and we have to adapt to the changes that already are occurring. And fourth, we have to design differently. We have to design what I say in this book, The Design of Everyday Things, is what's called today human-centered design. And I tell you today, I've been teaching that for 20 years and it's wrong. There's nothing in the book that's wrong. There's nothing, I still teach the very same philosophy. What's wrong is what's not in the book. What's not in the book is we use exotic materials. Karl, you do that too. When you teach your courses, you use these wonderful new materials, but where do they come from? How do we destroy the environment in mining to get them or smelting to make them into a form that we can use, or when we mix several different materials together so it's light and strong and wonderful? But when you're finished with the product, you can't unseparate it anymore. And so it becomes waste. Or we make things that deliberately are only meant to be used 2 or 3 years, like your cell phones or like your computers. And we make them so thin and wonderful and light that you can't take them apart easily. They're glued together. You can't even repair them easily. And so that's the problem. That's one of the many problems. And finally, humanity-centered designers, first of all, they don't have much power. Why don't they have much power? Because they don't move up in the company. Why don't they move up in the company? Because they're so proud of their crafts skills that they don't bother. They don't like administration. They don't like government. They don't like politics. Let me tell you, every important problem in the world is a political problem, and it ought to be. Because politics is the way that you actually reach a compromise when different people have different points of view, and they're often very legitimate, but they may be contradictory. That's the good part of politics. As you all know, that's not necessarily how politics always works, but that's the way it ought to work. And so, well, that's what I did in the book, talk about these things.
All right.
And you now
Well,
discover that I give long answers, but
oh, hey, that's beautiful. Makes my job
well,
easy.
you're allowed to shut me up if I go on too long.
Well, okay, so Don, I heard in that answer. So first of all, we got these big problems. Let's just take sustainability as one of them. There are others, of course. Polarization, human health, there's poverty, there's a whole variety of global problems.
Well, the
But
United Nations has 16 of them. Yes.
yeah, so that's what we are doing to the planet is certainly high on that list, and maybe is one of the most vexing of these challenges. So I heard two ways. I could interpret what you said two ways. One is that designers, all of us working in our current design roles, are not sufficiently mindful of the impact we have on those macro effects. That would be the more narrow view of what you said. But I also read in the book, I think, that there are designerly ways to quote Nigel Cross, there's some designerly ways of knowing and doing that could address the wicked problems in society if properly applied. Uh, did you in fact mean that second one? And if
I
so,
absolutely did. I
okay.
did.
Can you say, can you give me the essence of what I have my own theory, but the essence of what you mean when you say designerly? What is the essence of design thinking, a design approach to these wicked problems?
Let me start by saying one of the things I do not include. Designers are proud of their creativity.
Papalyain kaya na. Papa-schedule kayo
Can you,
software na papalyain.
somebody needs to mute. Hey, folks. Okay, go ahead, Don. Yeah.
Designers are proud of their creativity. And I was at a conference in last October in Shanghai, and I was running the panel, and one of the panel members was talking about how he trains people to be creative and novel. And when one of his students comes up with something that isn't novel, he said he tells them what's wrong and makes them go back until they come up with something that's novel and creative. And I said, why? Why does something have to be new? If somebody has a really good solution to something, why shouldn't you use it? Why is it you have to come up with something new and different? Because if it's new and different, then it's a complex problem. It's probably not as good as the stuff that already exists. And the way science works, the way engineers work, is you build on things that already exist. You either use them or you improve them and build on top of them. But the notion that you must do something that's different every time, no. So first of all, creativity is going to be important, but it's not essential. Second, we have to study when we look at a problem. Well, we train people in engineering and we train people in business to solve problems. But what we don't train them to is solve the right problem. They don't think about, is this the right problem? And designers are trained to think about, what's the real problem here? Let's not try to solve the symptoms. Let's try to figure out what the underlying causes are and solve those, or otherwise the symptoms will recover. Actually, you have to solve the symptoms simply to help people, but unless you get to the underlying issues. Now, as you go deeper and deeper, the underlying issue gets more and more complex. So you can't go all the way to the bottom. You have to go to the lowest level where you can actually do something. And almost always those lowest levels require political decisions. And but here's the thing about the design profession. Designers don't have any skills, any knowledge outside of the design methods that they have. They don't really understand the world. They don't understand technology. They don't understand business. They don't understand this. They don't understand health. They don't understand, well, and I consider that a good thing, a virtue. Because what we have are design methods that we can use to approach almost any problem, but we aren't stuck with the way that things are being done today. And that's where the fresh eye helps. But it also means that we have to talk to all the experts. Most of the experts are fairly narrow. That's what we do, is we train people in universities to have deep understanding of the issue they are studying. But in order to do something real in the world, you have to be generalists. You have to bring together all these different fields and figure out how they should work together. And so that's a skill of a designer. The designers can actually help bring them together. And one more component that makes design different is that there are lots of fields that try to bring together large groups of people to solve these problems. In fact, almost any modern product requires very many disciplines to come and work together. However, Usually, what they are trying to optimize is time and money. You want to keep to the schedule, you got to keep to the budget, and the budget has to be small, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, those are important, but what designers are trained to do is optimize quality of life, optimize the benefits to people. And I think as we approach these societal issues, optimizing for quality of life and for the benefits of people and existing cultures across the world, that's what's going to be important. And that's why I think designers could play a role, but not the way designers are trained today, because you will have to know more about history and about culture and about politics and how business works. But also, universities train specialists. Great universities like Penn always want to hire the best people in a field. Well, how can everybody hire the best people in the field? Well, by making the fields very narrow. So you have many, many specialties. And in fact, in any department, mechanical engineering, design, mathematics, almost any department has so many different specialties that quite often people in one specialty, don't even understand what is being done by people in the other specialties in their same department. So designers are the ones that I think can go across this boundary because
All right.
we
Yeah.
have to work with them.
All right, John. So those were beautiful words. So I want to see if I can summarize them for our audience. So I heard you say um, designers are good at solving the right problem, reframing and asking why, getting to the root cause. Second, they are process oriented, which makes them less political. They're focused on the process, not the political interests. Third, they're good integrators across disciplines. And fourth, they have values. The value is the human at the center of the process. So I love those. And if I could add two, I would say they have a culture of yes, optimism, and a bias for action, which I think are not prevalent in a lot of our process.
Design is actually a field of doing. It's a field of
Yeah, yeah,
practice, which
yeah.
actually gives it problems in the university because
Yeah.
it's not, yeah, its
All
basis
right.
is doing.
But here's the problem. So here we all on this call, no one's going to disagree at this event. No one's going to disagree with that. We're all going to pat ourselves on the back at how good we are at this. What I'm struggling with now at this point is where in society can we find purchase to actually a place to place the fulcrum for our lever? Where is the wedge? Where is the place to get started where being a designer equipped with this mighty, pencil and process can actually get started on these huge problems?
Well, first of all, what the design started as a tool of management of companies. It was to help sell more products. It started in the porcelain dishware industry in England. They were artists in those days, but that was the beginning of the design profession. And so design has really always been a tool of companies to make better products and ones that will be selling and that will make profits for the company. There's nothing the matter with that. Companies, if they don't make a profit, they don't stay in business. So it doesn't matter how good the company is if it isn't making money. And so that part of design will maintain itself. It has to change, however, because the kinds of things we're building are destructive to the environment. And as I said, especially digital products are destructive to cultures. And if you're working on digital products, don't think that, oh, well, I don't destroy the environment. Yes, you do. Every digital product runs on a physical product. And more, if you take a look at the new AI systems, the amount of electricity they require is huge. And where does that electricity come from, et cetera? So first of all, designers, we have to move to what's called the circular economy. And I'll let you decide if we want to come back to that. But doing that is going to be really good for the environment, but not necessarily for the company. It's going to cost more money. And it means that we want to reuse everything and make it last as long as possible because it can be repaired. And companies might say, but we make products. We make our money by selling new products all the time. And if a product lasts forever, how are we going to stay in business? And so we have to change the business model. But there are ways of doing that. That's one dimension. The other dimension is working on societal projects. And there we have to learn new techniques and new means because in the standard human-centered design approach, we're designing for thousands, millions, in some cases even billions of users of the same product. And therefore, the methods that were designed to give us understanding of the many different kinds of people and uses of these products. If we're doing societal things, we're usually going in to put in like a new sewerage system or a new public health system or maybe a new educational system or transportation, but problems that are fairly large and are going to last a long time, but also have to be different from place to place to place. The environments are different. The way people live are different. The structure of the cities where they live are different. The homes are different, and the cultures are different. So those are going to be more difficult. And notice there's not necessarily any profit in this. So how do you keep going? So, for example, this morning I had a long phone call with folks from the Aga Khan Foundation who are partnering with me on some of the work we're trying to do. And they're based in Geneva, and they mostly work in Africa and Asia. So most people in the United States haven't heard of them. But they are doing exactly the same kind of work that I've been talking about, humanity-centered design. And so we're trying to figure out how to change the way the funding happens. Funding mostly comes from governments, and it also comes from private foundations and NGOs, non-government organizations. But you know, if you're probably taught how to be an entrepreneur and how to have a new idea and how you pitch it and you get some money, when you do that, the people who are going to give you money look a little bit at your idea, but they don't necessarily think it's going to work, but they see okay, it has some promise. They look at you and they say, when your ideas don't really work, are you going to be smart enough to discover that quickly and pivot, do something different that does work?
Yeah. So
But
Don,
that's not how the funding works. That's
Yeah.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The funding today, you've got to put in a full plan, and it's going to take 4 or 5 years. You've got to say everything you're going to do in those 4 to 5 years, and you have to guarantee you will be successful in those 4 to 5 years, and you have to be every landmark. You have to have all these benchmarks that say, "See, we're on target," and that's a recipe for failure. Because when you're doing these things, you have to be able to do a small little thing and see if it works. And usually it won't work properly completely. So you should modify and continue. And if it's going to take a number of years, probably the goal will have to change because new things happen in those years. And so we want to change the whole funding picture to make it possible for people to do these projects.
So Don, I want to ask one more question, then we'll open it up. Says will be ill-formed, but in your book you talk, you're I'd say obliquely critical of Bill Gates and his How to Avert a Climate Crisis book, which I also read. And I think if I would characterize Gates, he would say it's got to be everything everywhere all at once. This is such a massive problem that there are no small solutions, and in fact we cannot be picky. And so yes to nuclear power, yes to geoengineering, the climate. I mean, we got to be yes to everything, or it's just not enough. So how would you respond to that? I mean, at the end of the day, I know you're critical of our metrics, but at the end of the day, we can measure sea level temperatures. We can see if we're moving the needle or not, and it doesn't really look like we are. And so doesn't it have to be everything everywhere all at once?
Yes, but not the same thing. So look, Gates' book on the solutions is an excellent book. He's a really excellent technologist. He's done a really excellent analyses of the different issues and the different alternatives. And I think that he's correct and that we need to do what he says. However, he also says one other thing in his book is, oh, yeah, I'm not a politician. I'm not going to talk about politics. And as soon as I read that, I said, you're going to fail, Bill, because these are political problems in the end. And come on. And I'm calling him Bill because I actually do know him. Yes. So when we used to interact. And the other thing is that I believe that for these big problems where you don't want to ruin the cultures and take over the cultures, and you don't want to be a colonialist that goes in and says, I'm the expert and I've seen your problems and I understand them deeply, and here is a solution. Well, the experts who do this, there's a wonderful book called The Tyranny of Experts about this. The people who do this, are experts. They do understand the problem, but they don't understand the people and what they're capable of doing and how they live their lives. And they want to change it. And that's colonialism and that's evil. Worse than that, it doesn't work. So many most foreign aid projects have failed after spending billions of dollars. And the couple that succeed, they still go way over budget and way over the schedule. And you build something that it works for a little while and then it breaks down, but the people there can't repair it. They don't have the skills, or it assumes that you have air conditioning or heating or electricity or continual water. And none of that's true necessarily. So you have to do it differently for every little group. And moreover, it has to come from the group. And so each one's going to be somewhat different because they have to accept it and own it. Otherwise, it doesn't keep being maintained. So here's what the United Nations said. So I said the United Nations had 16 major issues that need to be solved. But most people say, no, 17. There are 17 sustainable development goals. Number 17 is the answer to your question. We have to do these, but they have to be fitting each of the small communities. So they're all the relatively small projects, which is good, by the way. Small ones tend to work because you can modify and fit it. Number 17 is these are huge problems. Therefore, we have to have many, many different groups all working together to solve it over the world.
All right. Good answer. All right. Well, let's see if we can manage some questions. So let's try first. Let's just give it, as designers, let's bias for action. Let's just try free for all, first of all. So if you'd like to ask a question, turn on your video and ask your question. And let's see if that works. Okay, so I'm looking, I only see a couple videos. All right, Jess, let it rip.
Hi, thanks so much, Don, for taking the time to chat with everybody today. I'm curious, one of the things you talked about was how NGOs need to be one of the ways that we can look at funding some of these initiatives that are changing, cultures and changing the way that we as designers are operating. How does that fit in with, I've seen a lot of posts, especially on LinkedIn, about how design leadership is now being ousted from a lot of corporate structures where design was once seen as a fad and now it's seen as more of a tactic. So how do designers secure place in an NGO and a corporate environment to be able to have the reach, which is really the promise to improve that quality of life, when we see this kind of, dilettante view of corporations to come in and out with these approaches?
Well, you can't just walk in and say, I'm a designer. I make beautiful stuff and wonderful stuff. So hire me or promote me or whatever. No, you have to show your value. You have to understand what the problems are and address those problems. And very few designers are trained to do that. Very few departments of design teach you to do that. So I put the blame on designers themselves. Designers often complain that they're people, my bosses don't listen to me. And so I say, okay, tell me how you describe your work to the bosses. Well, we go in and we show them the work we're doing, and we show them how wonderful it is, and we show them the prizes we won, and we show them the letters of appreciation. And I say, well, okay, if I were your boss, I would say, yes, that's very good. You are really good. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know, but now excuse me, but I must get back to work. What you have to do is you have to think about the company and what it's trying to do, or in the case of an NGO, what its goal is, and say, I think I have some ideas that can help you. But you have to present those ideas. You have to understand your customer. We train designers to understand the people they're designing for, but they always think of that's the person who's going to use my product or maybe use my system or whatever it is that I'm designing. It doesn't have to be a physical product. Well, yeah, that's true, but you know who your boss, who you, who your customer is also? It's the person you work for. It's your boss, or more importantly, your boss probably understands you. It's the boss of your boss. And so you have to speak their language, and their language is going to be, it depends upon the company or an NGO, their language is going to be in the company spreadsheets, profits, losses, margins, uh, competition. And in the NGO, it's I have an idea how we can actually do this project that will help the people, and I'll work with the people. So it's going to be, they can repair it, they can work on it, they can help develop it, they will accept it. But you have to demonstrate that you have that knowledge and ability. Otherwise, yeah, designers don't play any role. So as one more thing, until I get shut up, um, I've established a charity and it named after me. My friends wanted me to do that. So it's the Don Norman Design Award. And what we're doing is we're rewarding young practitioners, not famous people. They don't need another award. It's people like you, just starting out when you really need encouragement. But what I'm saying is I don't want a design because a design is just a concept. I want you to be out there in the field actually doing something that, and you've measured to show that you're getting positive results. And I don't care how you were trained. I don't care if you're a designer. I don't care what you are. I don't care if you never went to school. What I care about is what you're doing because I want something that actually is making a difference to people. And we give you an award that will make it easier for you to get funding to continue. So it's the real issue is what are you going to do?
All right. Sanchi, do you have a question?
Right. I know there are so many Sanchis on the screen right now, but
Huh. No, you're the real one. You're the actual one.
right. So I'll go with that. So we've been discussing, and one question that came up was a lot of people at C-suite level, like you encourage them to now make a humanity-centered decision as well of taking sustainability over economic decisions. So how do you suggest that can happen? And if you have an example of a company who has done that really well in past.
No company can survive if it ignores the finances. So you have to tell people how they can do good for society while also staying in business. So there are several different ways of doing this. If you take this case that everybody quotes is Patagonia, the sporting goods company, which is now a B Corp, not a C Corp. Those of you who know about corporations is the problem with C Corps and S Corps is the traditional corporations is that according to practice and according to our Nobel Prize laureate in economics, they owe the responsibility to their shareholders, not to the employees, not to the customers, not to the place where they live. So there has been a recent invention called the B Corp, and think of B as betterment, where you actually owe your responsibility to your customers and to your employees and to the place where you're located. Well, Patagonia is such a company, but one of the ways they actually do something, they actually will, if you buy their expensive clothing and you rip it, you send it back to them and they'll fix it, send it back to you. And they'll keep repairing it for you. And if at some point it isn't repairable, you send them the non-repairable clothes because they're going to use the components all over again. And they do that, but they charge a lot of money. You pay slightly more money for their expensive camping gear and clothing and warm gear, and they're really good. But they're a small company. They're fairly big in the hiking and whatever you want to call that field, but they're relatively small as companies go. And so they make enough money that they can keep going. The other way you have to do it, and I have a friend who started the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado. It's now called RMI. And what he said once was, you can convince a company that they should change the way they're doing things because it's good for the world. Change your packaging or change the way you manufacture or this, that, and the other. But you know what? The next time there's some economic downturn, they'll stop doing it. So the way you have to convince a company to do this is don't tell them it's good for the world. Tell them it's good for you. You know the smoke coming out of your smokestack, you know the waste coming out of your pipes and which pollutes the air and the water. Well, that's money. So let me show you how you can minimize that and therefore keep and save money, make money. And so that's what you have to do. You have to be very clever and figure out how by reusing things, you actually are going to save money. And companies are doing this. I make coffee using coffee pods, but they're made out of aluminum. And so when I buy the pods, I can also get a free bag. And I dump them into the bag. When the bag is completely full after about 200 pods, I get a QR code and I can print out a mailing label. So they pay the postage to have it go back to them. The pods are made out of aluminum, which is the most reusable element of all because you just melt it and then remake it. And the insides, which is the coffee, the grounds that have been used, those are also valuable. They use those to make packing material. You can use it to make it's good for roads. You can pack it in densely and then use it as material. And it's also good fertilizer. You can just dump it on the grounds and it becomes fertilizer for new plants. So that's the kind of thing that we have to be searching for. But it also means we need to develop new materials. Someone has to be developing biologically based materials that do not do harm if they're disposed, if they're thrown away, but also make materials that are easy to reuse. And they aren't right now. You use a paper cup to drink coffee. Can you recycle it? Not really, because it isn't paper. It's paper, but inside it has a thin plastic lining, which is necessary. But to separate that plastic is so hard, and mostly that it's never recycled.
All right, Bardman, take it away.
Amazing. So, Don, Karl, thank you for taking the time. My question is, as an integrated product design student at Penn, you talked about universities not currently adapting to the needs of the global problems. But I'm very curious to hear if you think the industry has changed to actually demand designers who's able to think that way and address problems in an interdisciplinary fashion. I know that there are programs that are increasingly trying to challenge conventional design education, like IPD and RCA IDE program that you've also been in touch with, Don. But do you feel like there are roles out there for those kind of people today? If not, what needs to change in the industry as well?
I haven't seen that much change in industry, unfortunately. Industry still tends to the industry knows that you have to have multidisciplines, but you still have the marketing people in one place and the engineers or the program. Well, you divide engineers by their field, but so the programmers are in all together, and the mechanical people are all together, and the designers are someplace else, and the salespeople are there, they kind of work with each other, but they're often more competing than working in many companies. And it's very hard to get them to work as a team, whereas I feel you need multidisciplinary teams. Now, let's take a look at the university, because the university is one of the few places where we are trained to do stuff by ourselves, and we get these grades. And the professors say, well, if you did it in a project, how do I know who did what? How do I give grades? And so on. And the new AI, just like when calculators were first introduced, we didn't want people to use calculators because we need them to learn arithmetic. And the new AI, well, they'll be cheating. They'll use it. Well, I'm in favor of cheating. I wrote an article once called "In Favor of Cheating," because in the universe, in the world, you're supposed to ask people for help. And if your boss says, "What's all this new AI stuff? I don't know how we could use it. Would you write me a little short paper about that? Tell me what we can do with it?" And you say, "Oh, well, sure, I'll do it," but you don't how to know. You don't know how to do it. You should go and ask your colleagues. And someone says, "Well, I just wrote a little thing. Oh, can I use that?" And oh, there's a good article. Yeah, I'll use that. Now, in the university, because you're not supposed to do that, you have to lie and say, "I did it by myself." What I want is when you take it from somebody else, give them credit. Because look, in my book, I brag about the fact that the problems are well known. I didn't state them. I didn't add to them. They add the analysis, and the solutions are well known. But I give credit to all those people. And what I've done, though, is I've picked things that fit together, and I give value by the perspective I put on it. And that's how we should grade people. We should grade people. We should also have project teams. But right now, when you have a project team, like for Karl's group, they'll all be mechanical engineers in a project. No, I want you to have some people in the business school be there, and I want you to somebody from the humanities, because we have these specialties. So I say you have to know about people. I don't like STEM education, even though I'm highly educated in S and T and E and M, because it has nothing about people or about business or about the world and how it gets applied. So, but where does that come from? Well, one thing is, if you want to learn about people, don't go to the psychology department. I got my PhD in what was called mathematical psychology, and I'm an expert on how the ear works. Oh, that's good, but so where do you learn about people? Not anthropology, not sociology, not psychology. Go to the novelist in the humanities. People who learn to write novels have to understand people because they have to describe them and how they do things in everyday life so much that you say, "Yeah, I know people like that." And that helps you build better products. So, yeah, but I don't think companies are there yet. And the companies are struggling because they know that the issues are here. The good news about climate change is that it's wrecking people's lives. It's causing floods and famine and hunger and windstorms and fires. That's the good news because, oh, people are now taking it seriously. But the companies don't know how, and they need help because it is a hard job. How do I change everything but without bankrupting my company? And so that's the challenge that all of us face. And you can't solve it from one discipline alone. It has to be multidisciplinary, this solution.
All right. Nina, do you have a question? No, you don't. You're just, okay. It's nice to see your face, though. Let's see. Anyone else queued up in that queue? Anyone else want to ask a question? Okay, I'll go to my list. So the backup questions from the chat. Don, it'd be really interesting if you could cite some examples of I'd be really curious. Are there any societies, cities, countries where you feel that these principles have been applied? Because as designers, we want to reuse, we want to build on what we already know. So what models can we look to of success?
Well, one of the best sources of information about the circular economy, which is a key method for sustainable products, is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is located in the island of Bite, a little island in the south of England. And so it's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. You can easily browse for it. And they work with companies, and they have lots and lots of examples of cities that are using their methods, et cetera. And in economics, there's a wonderful area in a group in Oxford that are talking about donut economics. And I use them because their donut was basically, it's a wonderful way of getting a quick overview of the issues that are facing. It could be for even a company. It's done now for cities and for countries, but it could be for a company showing you where you're strong and where you're weak. It's a dashboard basically, but for they mainly design it for two things. One is societal issues, and the other is ecological issues. But it's a good way of presenting information quickly, so you know where to focus.
How about as I was reading, I mean, I in the last year, just because of odd coincidence, I ended up spending on three separate occasions, spending a lot of time in Singapore. And Singapore is a pretty remarkable place, but in some ways, it's kind of the antithesis of the things you're talking about. It's very STEM oriented. It's very technocratic, and yet, man, that place just works. Do you have a perspective on more technocratic approaches and whether they can be successful?
Um, I'm not sure I would call Singapore technocratic, because they do worry a lot about the quality of life for their citizens. It's a dictatorship, but a very benevolent dictatorship. They call
Yeah.
themselves a democracy, uh, but and yes, it's run by technocrats because their staff, the people who run the governments, you don't hire your children or your neighbor or your friend, but everybody is well trained and you take exams to get in, and they're paid a lot of money, which helps eliminate
Yeah.
graft. They're paid the same salaries. So I was in Singapore in October, and I'm about to go to two different conferences, and one of them is in Thailand, where they're going to run a conference on design for a better world, and another one is in Manila, where they're running on the humanity-centered design, and they're very close to each other in time, so I can go to both. But guess what? The people from Singapore are involved in both of them because there's this wonderful grouping of nations in that region of the world. And so I just talked to the people from Manila about how we're going to run it, and I was surprised that there are two people that I had met when I was in Singapore. And the people in Singapore are, when I went there, they had this big poster on humanity-centered design. And I
Yeah.
said, "Where'd you get that from?" And they said, "Well, from your book." So, but because it's in order to run a country the way they do, they really do think hard about the way people live. So one of the interesting things is that they don't want you to drive an automobile.
Right. Yeah.
So they simply have high tariffs on it. And on top of that, you need a license to buy the automobile. I don't mean a license plate. I mean a license to buy a permit, if you will, to buy the automobile, which can cost more than the automobile. So if you want to buy a Prius, it costs close to $200,000.
Yep.
But that works. So first of all, and by the way, the older the automobile, the more expensive the permits are, so you always arriving. So which keeps the pollution down, but also because very few people drive automobiles, they use public transportation. But Singapore is an island. It's very small, although it's made up of many different cultures. But the smallness really helps a difference.
Yeah.
Helps a lot.
Yeah. And there are other small countries that are really impressive. New Zealand, the Scandinavian countries, et cetera. But I guess my pushback a little bit on the book would be, which I love, but it's not so much that metrics that are the wrong. I mean, Singapore has picked the right metrics and has used these fairly STEM technocratic methods to achieve great results, but they started with the right metrics. So it's kind of a case where the systems have not run amok. They've actually worked to the aims we all hope for.
Actually, they don't metricize everything. They wanted to minimize automobile driving. They just boom made it expensive.
Yeah.
And so on. And yeah, my complaint for the audience about metrics is that Lord Kelvin once said, "If you can't measure something, it means you don't understand it." And so all the fields, all the social scientists have picked up on this and try to measure everything. So, and the economists are the worst offenders of all. They measure everything, including things you can't measure, and you always measure it in units of money because they want everyone to have a common unit so we can do our mathematics. And then they do their impressive mathematics, and people, oh, well, I must be right. It's mathematical. Well, there's a joke going along in economics that the economists have predicted 18 of the world's last 6 inflations. Come on. They're almost always wrong. And one reason they're wrong is, first of all, it's the wrong mathematics. And second of all, it's they don't understand people. They're too logical about people. And they assume we have complete, perfect information. And, one of the people who argued against this was Herb Simon. And he got a Nobel Prize in economics. And when I heard about that, I was driving my car in San Diego, and I went back to my university and I went to the economists and I said, hey, look, Herb got the Nobel Prize. And they said, what a waste of the Nobel Prize, because he wasn't an economist. They didn't listen. Well, today, thank goodness, because the Nobel Prize is now giving out multiple prizes to what's called behavioral economics. Like the last one was to Danny Kahneman. It was Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, people I knew when they were graduate students. And they were psychologists. So it's about time the economists are starting to listen to people who understand people. And so that's a major problem. And if you go back to Lord Kelvin, he didn't say if you don't understand it, if you don't measure, you can't understand it. He said in the physical sciences. Because we are history, we are path dependent as people. Yet the physical sciences tend to be path independent. Doesn't matter how this object got it here. If I drop it, it drops the same way the laws of physics apply.
Daniel, do you have a question? You pop back up. Daniel, for now. Okay. All right, great.
I see Sanchi.
Sanchi, you have another question? Oh, that's not actually Sanchi, but the guy with the hand up. Tell us your name and ask your question here.
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead. Just tell us who you are.
I don't know. It's nice meeting you. So
Okay.
I have a question. Like, usually, like in the current markets, like for example, like for any problem, for example, like sleep or any kind of like health related issues, like most of the solutions are rising, like applications, like whatever you have sleep problems, food, everything. They're kind of like developing an app for it. Um, like is it? It seems like it's easy to develop solutions on on the top layer. Like they don't want to dive deep into the fundamentals because for sleep it could be anything. Like it might be the environment, it could be like anything, like psychologically. So is it like what do you say? Like is it required to educate the people that, or just to go with the flow, like maybe the people will evolve by themselves and then we could develop the product at that time? Or is it to wait for the right time, or is it just to build the product and then educate the people?
No, I'm a big fan of decide what problem you want to attack and understand the problem deeply and attack it properly. It's in fact, what you are talking about is somebody has a hammer and now they look around for nails. So, oh, I can make an app. So there's an app for everything, and they're mostly worthless because you have to get at what the real underlying issues are. And there are other people who tell me, oh, the real problem is communication. So I've made an app that will explain everything and to communicate and allow you to understand. Well, that's not where the problem really lies. I mean, they make up a solution. No, you have to test the solutions. So I'm not a fan of apps. Do I use a lot of them? Of course. A lot of them are good and they actually help me. But I must have 200 or 300 apps on my phone. That's not unusual, by the way. And how many do I really use? I don't know, 6 or 7.
All right, Don, we are at the top of the hour. We really appreciate you taking the time. Sanchi, are you going to bring us home here? Give us the wrap? All right.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, first of all, Professor Dawn, for taking out time and for this thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much, Professor Karl Ulrich, for moderating and asking those questions that were lingering in all our minds as well. And thank you for our audience for taking out time. We all, I speak for everyone here that we all got inspired, and it has shaped the way we think of human-centered design, which is now humanity-centered design moving forward. And we will be soon providing you to a link of recording as well. And hope you all have a good day.
So
Thank you.
thank you, everybody, and good luck in your careers.
Yes. Thank you.